In this video I'm going to be repairing a leaking Tuff Torq K61 gearbox. However, a very similar procedure applies to most of the Tuff Torq gearboxes. Now it doesn't matter what lawnmower you've got because it was fitted to so many different ones, but this is a 15 horsepower liquid cooled John Deere mower. But that really is beside the point. What we're going to do first of all is remove the footplate, which is covering up the fuel tank and then in turn the gearbox. I would advise draining the fuel tank prior to removal, just so you're not juggling with a full tank of fuel. However, if you don't want to, then of course that's also fine. Once the fuel tank is out, it'll then gain access to the top half of the gearbox, and this is where all of the dirt really does get trapped. So it's actually no bad thing taking the gearbox off for this, because you can give it a good clean. I then remove the fuel line so I can take the tank out of my workspace. After this, I take the wheels off. We're basically just working our way to the centre of the gearbox so that there is nothing really in the way for removal. To do this I'm using some circlip pliers, and then hopefully with a bit of luck your axle will be greased so your wheel should just slide off. At least that's the theory. I'm going to take this opportunity to blow off the entire tractor just to keep it nice and clean so it doesn't keep getting dirty in the area when working throughout this small project. It really is amazing how much dirt you can accumulate just off a gearbox. With this done, it's now time to drop the gearbox out of the tractor. Obviously not literally. To do it on this machine, there are basically just two bars which have got two nuts on each. Once they're removed, the gearbox will lower. However, prior to doing that, please ensure you've removed all the linkages first. I would also advise supporting the gearbox with a trolley jack or something similar. Now everything has been removed, I need to very carefully lower it down. Now you can see that everything has been removed and the gearbox is completely free of the machine. This is now a good time to drain the oil from the gearbox just so you don't make a mess when you put it onto your work table. This is now a perfect opportunity to clean off any residual oil which is around it. Unfortunately, I've got quite a bit on this one, so I'm going to basically just soak it in degreaser and then we'll be able to clean it off with the airline. I'll also be inspecting other areas on the gearbox for cracks or anything which doesn't look entirely right. This bolt here, as far as I'm aware, is the one at fault. It might not be the same for you, but there is actually a seal which should be around the top of that bolt on the inside. Now I'm just using standard engine degreaser here, which actually works very well, but you must leave it on long enough for it to actually work. Also try not to get it on any other seals which you don't think you're going to be replacing. This is when a compressed airline really does come in handy. It makes cleaning all the gunk out of the tight nooks and crannies very, very simple. Now it's much cleaner than it used to be. It's obviously much harder to see exactly where the oil leak is coming from, but I think that it is this bolt just here. It would just make sense since there is a seal on the other side. So what I'm going to do is remove it and see if there's any oil on it. Which there is, which means that this is definitely the source of the oil leak, meaning we have to split the entire gearbox in half just to be able to reseal it. You probably could get away with just putting a copper washer on here, but I'm going to do a job properly. It's just not really worth taking shortcuts. So what I'm doing here is just loosening off every single bolt with the impact wrench. Never reinstall the bolts though with an impact wrench. I always find it fine to remove them, but not to install. This is when you have to take note of two different bolts which are different sizes. One here and one over here. This may not apply for every gearbox, for example the K46. What we need to do now is very carefully pry the sump off the gearbox without snapping the tags. With that now removed, it's a perfect opportunity to just inspect the inside of the gearbox to make sure there's no wearing parts or excessive build-ups of any metal shavings. Everything seems to be very good on this gearbox, so what we're going to do now is proceed to remove the original sealant from the two sides of the casing. This is quite a long-winded job, so I'm going to go off screen to do most of this, but what you've got to do is make sure you get rid of all of it and don't drop any inside the gearbox. If you do, it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely not advised to drop anything in there, so just try and pick it out if you do. This is the source of the problem. It's just a circle which goes around the bolt. The sealant obviously has not been installed properly, or it's just burst and the oil has managed to get through the bolt and onto the thread. So using a chisel or anything, gasket scraper, the original gasket now needs to be scraped. Take note that I'm actually pushing it away from the inside so it falls off the back. That's basically what I'm looking for, nice and clean, so that the new sealant can contact it perfectly without any leaks. Next, you can see that this is the other side of the case, and this is again the sealant which is left on there, and you can actually see there is a piece missing. This is likely where the oil was leaking through to the bolt from. This entire job is actually very easy, it just takes a lot of time. And there we go, that is the lower half done, all cleaned up. I've also wiped out the inside of it as well, just to make sure it's nice and clean, so we don't put any gunk back in there. Now it's time to apply the brand new sealant. I'm using Permatex Ultra Grey Gasket Maker. I've always had very good results with this particular gasket sealant, so I think it's brilliant. Obviously you need to have the correct type of sealant for each application, but I've always found for gearboxes, this is great stuff. Obviously don't hold me to that, because obviously it could be different for different gearboxes, but it's just what I found from personal experience. It begins applying the bead of sealant. We must be very careful here, make sure you go around every single bolt, and also whatever you do, if you're doing this gearbox, don't forget the one that was originally leaking in the centre. I've always considered myself to be a bit over generous when it comes to applying this sealant. You really don't need that much at all. I always seem to put way too much on, but in my personal opinion, putting too much on is better than not putting enough in, because obviously then it's going to leak. So yeah, too much is bad because it's going to fall inside, not enough, it's going to leak. There is a balance. It's not too strict, but just, you know, go steady with it. So what we're doing here is reapplying the sump, obviously, ready to put the bolts back in. What you mustn't do is you mustn't forget to put the oil filter back in if you're going to take it out. Now, very important, these bolts need to be installed in the correct order with the correct torque values. That's why I've got this diagram here. If you want to get a diagram for yours or for this one in a much higher resolution, the Tuff Torq website is the best place to go to. That will help you massively, and in fact for this entire job I would recommend following Tuff Torq's official instructions rather than following mine. This is just to show you some of the work that I have done. So what we're doing now is putting every single bolt back in, obviously in the correct order, and torquing it then to the correct value. That's all done. Now what I'm doing is torquing every single bolt, obviously in the same order which I was told to do in the instructions. I think if you were to do it in the wrong order, it wouldn't make a drastic difference, but if you do over tighten one side more than the other, you can crack the casting, so you must be careful. I think really the idea here is common sense. Even if you did it without the instructions, you'll probably be absolutely fine, but common sense must be applied at all times. So yeah, I'm just going to do all this, and then we're going to refit it to the machine and give it a go. Hopefully everything is going to work as it should do with no leaks. There is one very important job you must do first though, and that is refilling it with oil. You must make sure you put the correct oil in, otherwise you may damage the gearbox. To find out the oil required for your gearbox, check out the Tuff Torq website. So, I'm going to put mine in now. Also, you need to check how many litres yours requires as well. They do actually require quite a bit. Also, we've got the reservoir as well, but that can be filled up later. So what I'm going to do is refit it to the machine using the trolley jack underneath. This is just to aid it. And then once it's attached, you then need to put all of the linkages back on again. You can see I've put a brand new hose on for the reservoir, so we're going to attach that once everything is bolted on. Everything is now on, the reservoir is in, and then the reservoir must be filled up to the full check cold level. Everything there is done, the fuel tank's in, a brand new fan has been installed as well. This will prevent overheating in the future. If you don't install the fan or if it breaks, you will likely damage the gearbox. These things don't tend to forgive you if you let them overheat. Another thing which must be done before you drive it is you must bleed the gearbox, but again that is quite complex, so please check out your manual. I can thankfully say everything's working as it should be with no leaks. Thank you so much for watching, hopefully you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, see you again very soon. Bye for now.